Coming up on the Minute the Movies podcast, we blast off into Interstellar. We talk about the importance of our why, because if we do the right thing for the wrong reasons, it's wrong. And while we tend to look at Murphy's Law as a negative event, we see that variability is actually necessary for sustainable life. Don't forget your watch, and let's discover God's truth in this movie.
The movies and stories we love are gateways to see ourselves and God in new ways.
Every great story borrows its power from a larger story, the story that's written on our hearts and woven into the fabric of our very being. Hello and welcome to the Minute the Movies podcast. My name is Paul McDonald, and joining me once again from his office is my friend Andrew. Hey Andrew, how you doing this morning?
Doing good. How are you?
Good. We are getting together on a Saturday, which is not something I normally do, but when we were trying to arrange this and this movie, we'll talk about why Interstellar has impacted us and leaving us sobbing emotional wrecks at the end of the movie. I remember we were going back and forth because you're the trainer for your high school sports.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yep. Yeah. This time of year, I'm covering football and soccer and volleyball. So, like you said, we'll get into that later, but I don't get to see my family a whole lot during this time. So it's hard not only to fit in family time, but anything else like this. So I really appreciate you kind of bending your family time on the weekend and being able to fit me in.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, the family thing, the father, especially father-daughter stuff. I have a daughter, you have two daughters. Yeah, it's going to come up in a little bit later in our conversation. You don't just do the sports trainer stuff. As we mentioned before, you've got gohavoc.com.
Yeah.
.com, right?
Yeah. .com, yeah. Yes. Yep. GOHAVOK. I don't know if that's mirrored or not, or if it's Kova. I don't know.
No, it actually is not mirrored, so that's nice.
Good. It's Havoc. Yeah. Yeah. We didn't figure that out, with the K being backwards. If you flip it, it sounds like a virus that nobody wants to talk about. So we're gonna release our newest anthology soon. Here's a little sneak peek at the cover. But it is animal kingdoms. So every story in there is highlighting different aspects of the creatures that populate the earth and what's so awesome or terrifying or mystifying about them. So yeah, that'll come out in a couple weeks. 45 stories, I think, in there, all 1,000 words or less. So you can read them while you're waiting for the train or going to the bathroom. So.
See, that's what I like. I might have to dive into that because I like those books. I struggle sometimes when I'm trying to find stuff to read because it's like, well, if I dive into this chapter is like 30 pages long. And I like getting to a stopping point. I like having feeling of completion. It's probably some sort of a neurotransmitter thing that get a dopamine hit from completing a chapter. And that's like 4 pages per chapter, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the beginning of a story. And that's the end of the story.
So 4 pages. It's nice. And these are the best of the best from your daily.
They are.
What do you call them again? The story bursts or something?
So the website. We put a free story daily, every weekday, that is, on the website. And, they're commented on, voted on, and that helps us, like you said, curate the best 30 over the last 6 months of stories. So it winds up being a pretty strong anthology.
Yeah, for sure.
I enjoy it.
Awesome. So check that out. The best way to get it's to go to the website, gohavoc.com. And that's Havoc with a K, HAVOK.com. So we're sitting here on a Saturday. I'm guessing your kids are bouncing around the house somewhere.
Yep. My office is down at the shop. Otherwise, I would never get anything done. But they're upstairs. They're actually, whenever I left, they were putting away their laundry.
Oh,
believe it or not,
well trained.
At 8 and 5. My wife is a brilliant and I don't know, mystifying woman. I don't know how she does it, but
because this movie, in all of its sci-fi and cinematography, cinematic grandeur, and it's awesome. It's beautiful. You got to see it, big screen, surround sound as much as you can.
Yeah.
But the first time I saw this movie was about 6 years ago, and it came out in 2014. So yeah, so it was probably just gotten to streaming. And so I'm sitting there, and the context of my life at that time, my son was turning 13, and I was preparing some sort of like a manliness, masculinity ritual to say, okay, you're done. Boyhood is over. You're going to spend the next, we did something at 18. So the next 5 years, you're sort of preparing for manhood. And so sort of celebrating who Brendan was, pulling all these pictures of stuff that he did. Cause I had some guys come in to bestow gifts, to bestow wisdom on him, we got him. I think he wanted, what did he want? I think he wanted some sort of Mexican food. I had it catered. It wasn't Chipotle. It was something else. I can't remember, but so I'm getting ready. So I was like, who is Brendan? I'm going to share this with the guys there. And it was really powerful going back and seeing all the things that we had done together. Because as a dad, that was, like I said, 6 years ago, it's still pretty new in my, I guess, restoration of faith. But because of my divorce, I was living under the lie that I was basically a failure as a father. I could never be a good dad because I'm divorced and left my children. So you can see how this movie, if you've seen it, and honestly, if you haven't seen this movie, don't listen to this podcast anymore, because this is a movie you want to see fresh, to see the ending like I got to see it the first time, surprised and blown away. And sobbing on my couch.
It's 3 hours long, but it doesn't feel like it's 3 hours long. It's just an experience.
Yeah.
That's all you can say. It's just an experience.
So the scene at the end where, he's trying to scream towards his daughter through the interdimensional things. I'm a sobbing wreck. The movie ends. I go into the kitchen where my wife is at the stove, and she looks up. This may be the first time she'd ever seen me cry before. And she's like, what's wrong? And between sobs, I was like, I'm not a bad father. And just start weeping again. And she's there and she's cooking. And she's like, I really want to hug you, but I'm cooking risotto. Which, if you don't know, risotto is like this time period where you have to stir it constantly for about an hour.
If you don't know, it is the truest form of love.
Risotto?
Risotto.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right, because you have to stand there for an hour to stir it. As you're like, nope, I got to put in another cup of water, stir it till it's gone. Okay. So I went over there. I stirred the risotto so she could give me a hug and all that. So that was my initial. I had not seen it since because I was scared of the emotional explosion that might occur. It did. I did get a little sobby in here, but nothing to that level that it was. But Andrew, you actually, I think, had a very similar experience, but in not as sort of a shame-filled way as mine was.
Right. Yeah. And so whenever you said when it came out, I was trying to think, actually, I watched that for the first time just before we got pregnant with our first kid. So I watched it for the first time without that connection as a parent. And it still got to me, just because it's just a wonderful movie. And I had watched it, a few times since then. But yeah, right whenever I first started watching it this time, I started tearing up just because that bond is so strong between a parent and a daughter, but particularly a father and a daughter, like you said, for the reasons of, your goals of protecting them and being there for them and, all that kind of stuff. But so my daughter started, it's called Little Ninjas. It's a combination of jujitsu and, kickboxing and wrestling and taekwondo. And if you saw her, she's 75 pounds soaking wet. And it's hilarious to see her out there just getting full bore. But she was so excited about it. And like you said, I'm busy this time of year, so I didn't get to go to her first two practices. And then by the time Wednesday came around, she's like, "Dad, you have to be there on Friday." And there's those few moments whenever a child picks you over the other parent. Like, oh, you've got to be better at this,
I've got to show up. I've got to come
whether
through.
Whether I'm better or not, I'm going to say I'm the authority, absolutely. I'll be there. So then I'm off in the afternoon on Fridays. So I was able to go, and then all week she was asking me about it. And then whenever I was there, she was just really focused in on me. And every time she'd do something, do a move, she'd look at me for approval or correction, even more so than the instructor, and a couple of times I'd have to be like, pay attention, But that morning, so I get maybe 10 minutes to see my kids in the morning before they're out the door. And, my oldest daughter, she's 8, she came up and, gave me a hug, said, I love you, have a good day, see you tonight. And then we just, kind of done. And I start to let go, and she doesn't let go. And I'm like, oh, that is so sweet. And then I start feeling her grip get tighter and tighter around my neck. And I'm like, and I'm just waiting.
You're putting a sleeper hold on me.
Yeah. She whispers in my ear. She says, this is how we choke people out. And I was like, yes.
That is awesome.
Yeah. So it's those moments, if it gives you some insight into, what the desires are and what the connections are. And, just my whole world revolves around them. Their whole world revolves around me in some ways like that. And to watch this movie and to see the connections that they make right off the bat, the very human connections between Cooper, the main character, and his son and his daughter, and the different connections between his son and his daughter, what that looks like. It really strikes to the core of the human condition, which we'll talk about that later. But yeah, so if you are a parent, you will definitely see this on a different level as if you're not. Yeah. But powerful movie for sure. And I was crying through the whole first act. So
right,
there's that.
Right, because that idea of having to leave our kids, and as you were talking, I realized that in our prep, we focused on Cooper and Murph as the father-daughter, but there's another father-daughter dynamic in the movie that I think it shows the other end of the spectrum. Right? It shows with Dr. Brand and Dr. Brand.
Yeah.
Right. You've got Cooper, who's played by Matthew McConaughey. He's a farmer, but he used to be a pilot. He wakes up, after dreaming about a crash. And his daughter also is in his footsteps. She wants to be like him. She wants to do that. There's that scene at the school where she brought in a textbook of his and got in a fight, and then he's going to reward her because she's echoing who he is in much a different way than his son.
Yeah.
And so when he leaves, it's very traumatic for her. Like he was and their mother had died, but he was the one who she connected with, who knew her. And she said, stay. It's like the message, the ghost, right? The ghost is in there. And she keeps saying, no, you need to stay. But he's like, I need to go. All the signs point to this of they've matched up. I'm called. Like there's no other pilot right now because of whatever's plague had gone on with the earth. He is going so that his children would have hope and have life. Mm-hmm. And Professor Brand, Michael Caine's character, he treated his daughter very differently because we'll find out he sent her on a mission that he knew would not succeed. They had a plan A, plan B. He knew plan A would never work. So he sent her knowing that he sent her away based on a lie.
Well, not only that, he essentially sent her away knowing that she wouldn't return.
Right.
Because they had the seeds of a new colony and not enough fuel to get home. He sent his daughter to her death on a lie to save the human race. That is intense.
Well, and in some way, and for him, he probably thought, I'm saving her life. She is going to start this new colony so she can live, and she wouldn't go if blah, blah, blah. That's his rationalization. Yeah. So we're going to get into all that, their dynamics, but I think it's important we're going to start back because there's a scene earlier in the movie between Cooper, who's Matthew McConaughey, and his father-in-law. I think his name was Donald, played by John Lithgow. By the way, superstar cast. Like you were saying, Andrew, you're like, I pulled up the cast on Google, and the two lines are all like people. They're like legit actors and just amazing list of performers in this movie.
Yeah. So Matthew McConaughey, Jessica Chastain, Anne Hathaway, Timothy Chalamet. Is it Chalamet? Is that what it is?
Chalamet,
the main character of the main character of Dune. Matt Damon, Michael Caine, John Lithgow, Wes Bentley.
Casey Affleck, Topher Grace, Colette Wolfe.
Yeah.
Like these are all people that we were like, wow, that person, they're in it. They're in it. It's really, especially, and some of them really aren't in very much. Like Colette Wolfe is somebody I recognize who I enjoy. She's really good. Like you mentioned, Wes Bentley. We didn't write down the voice of Tars.
Oh yeah.
You've got your computer up, so I'm going to let you do that.
Yeah. Case is Jon Stewart. I didn't realize that. Oh, Tars is Bill Irwin. I'm not sure.
You'd recognize him. He's a really, again, top billing stat, and directed by Christopher Nolan.
Yeah, it's got the cast of a Pixar film. Like they didn't have to do that, but they did.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's there's no reason not to watch it. Is what we're saying.
Yeah, for sure. So we're back to John Lithgow and Matthew McConaughey. Cooper sitting on the porch, drinking a beer in this dust bowl of a life that they're living in.
Which also they can still afford beer when there's no food around, like
right, and no wheat. So I don't know how you make beer without wheat.
Right.
So I mean, corn. At least you got plenty of bourbon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, who knows what they were drinking out of those bottles?
Yeah. So
it's the Dust Bowl.
So this was after that event where it didn't go well at the school, and John Lithgow is trying to help his son-in-law deal with life and deal with the kids, because he's not a farmer, even though that's where life has landed him. And so this is their conversation. We're going to start with a couple conversations that they have on the porch that sort of lay the groundwork for who Cooper is. But again, remember, if Murph is an echo of who Cooper is, that's who she is as well.
I hear your meeting at the school didn't go so well.
You heard? It's like we've forgotten who we are, Tom. Explorers, pioneers, not caretakers.
When I was a kid, it felt like they made something new every day. Some gadget or idea. Like every day was Christmas. But 6 billion people. Just try to imagine that. And every last one of them trying to have it all. This world isn't so bad. And Tom will do just fine. You're the one who doesn't belong. Born 40 years too late or 40 years too early. My daughter knew it, God bless her. And your kids know it, especially Murph.
Well, we used to look up in the sky and wonder at our place in the stars. Now we just look down and worry about our place in the dirt.
So Andrew, why did you say this is one of the scenes we gotta include?
Yeah. I mean, for several different reasons. One, it strikes to the heart of a lot of conversations that are going on right now in our world. How do we treat this earth? What is the importance of it? What is our place in it? That's obviously that's the root of, all of conversations is why are we here? But to hear the passion in their voices, but also the undertone of John Lithgow say, billions of people. Imagine that, and then after that, I believe they say something like, I believe Coop says something like, we were created on this planet. We were never meant to die here. The earth has been a treasure, and for years it's been telling us to get out, that type of thing. So the fact that nothing is infinite, and that this earth it will one day fold up and recede, and the fact, and we're meant to preserve and respect what we have, but it's not our purpose. Our purpose isn't to live and die and live as long as we can and make the planet live as long as we can. And I don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm really big into
Right.
preservation. But to get so caught up into that and thinking that that is our purpose, then you hear the passion of Cooper. We were explorers. You can't make it to outer space without burning, thousands of gallons of jet fuel. That's not good for the environment. I don't know if you know that, but
Hashtag science.
Yeah. And I was talking to this guy the other day. He used to work in the nuclear field, where he would create, the fuel for the pellets, basically creating nuclear waste. He's like, that's not good. He's like, what did we do with that? We buried it, and it's there for thousands of years. But that process led to nuclear fusion as we know it, and the cleanest form of energy that we know. So there's all these conversations that can be had of how do you respect what God has made and given us, but also embrace that creator spirit that He has, that He put in us, instead of being like you said, caretakers. We need to experience the world that He's created for us. But then it also goes back to, like you said, the conversation between a father-in-law and a son-in-law who is getting ready to leave his family. And he gets into, like you said, the relationship, the differences between the father and the son. He'll be fine. He's a farmer. This is what he was specifically created for. He is a farmer. He isn't meant to go to the stars. He knows that. He embraces that. But Murphy, who I want to talk about her name in a second, Murphy, she has the same spirit as her dad, and that shows throughout the film, that it can't be stopped. That indomitable spirit of creation and creativity, you can't stifle that. And so I just thought it was a very succinct clip of many layers of what this movie was about.
Well, and there's a line earlier in the movie where there's this ghost in the room and she's not scared of it, but there's things going on that she can't explain. Books falling off the shelves, and we'll see the dust coming down and all this. But the line was, "Science is about admitting what we don't know," which I think is really, really interesting. One, in how we look at science today is, science, everything must be proven. Everything, if it's not tangible, if it's not measurable, then it doesn't exist, which I think is a lot of what this movie is wrestling with. That's one of those deeper questions. And what makes this movie so good is there's multiple things that they're dealing with. Yeah. But that idea of science about admitting what we don't know, well, do an experiment. I can't explain this. How does this happen? And doing investigations and all this. Whereas now we look at science as sort of the proof of, no, this is how I know this, or people might say, well, I prove God exists. Science can't do it, so He must not.
Yeah, and if you'll allow me to go on a bit of a tangent, I'll kind of talk about Cooper's ultimate brokenness even toward the end of the film. So, we talked about the science of this movie earlier, and how the fact that they had a Nobel laureate, physicist, who is, his expert is in, string theory and Planck, kind of Planck scale stuff. The point of this, or the science behind the movie, is the fact that gravity can alter time. It's they're intertwined in an intimate way. So there's this big unknown in the movie of what goes on within a black hole, because that's the ultimate gravity well that we know of. And so time is the most affected. And so if we can figure out how that works, we can figure out how gravity works. And the crux of this movie is, if we can figure out how gravity works, we can lift a space station off the planet into space, possibly onto
without using those thousands of gallons of jet fuel.
Exactly. And then we can use that same technology to essentially fold space, creating a wormhole basically, and get to these other planets that we can habitate. But we can't do that because we can't get inside of a black hole. So how do we do that? How did this wormhole get here? by Saturn, I think is
Mhm.
where it was. This wormhole appeared, 30 years ago from an unknown force. They know how to do it, so they're helping us figure out how to do it. So that's the whole purpose behind the movie. But toward the end, you get Matthew McConaughey. He actually miraculously goes into this black hole, and then he gets to experience this world that these fifth dimensional beings created. And there's some reveals that when they thought they had contact with these fifth dimensional beings, it was actually just contact with themselves from the future because they were coming through this black hole. But what Matthew McConaughey says when he's in this structured reality that winds up being the bookshelf through 23 years or whatever, he says, "Don't you understand, Tars? It's us. These beings that created this construct, that's us millennia in the future. We transcend to a fifth dimensional being, and we can't we can't come into complete contact with the three-dimensional being because we transcended that." And that point right there is a fallacy. He has nothing to base that on in that moment. The only thing that he knows is that he is there right then in a construct created by a fifth dimensional being. He takes a giant leap just because he could manipulate that environment, and that us, the human race in that movie, getting closer to that by saying, "This is us. It's it's the indomitability of the human." Or what is that called? It's a philosophical thing, but it's basically
Talking to the wrong guy for that.
Basically, it's putting human as God.
Yeah.
We are the ultimate being, it was huge.
Which, because up to then it was a they, right? This
exactly,
but like they in sort of a supernatural sense. And
exactly.
now it's like,
the
there
whole
is
movie
no
they call it that.
supernatural. It's just us millennia away. Which again, you start getting in the time loop stuff, and you get a little squirrely. But so that's really interesting that they eliminated the supernatural by giving it to themselves.
He did specifically. Nobody else in the movie that we see ascribes to that. But him in that moment where he is full of love, full of emotion, the climax of the movie, he is in a supernatural construct for all intents and purposes. And he, at that moment, he still falls back on what he knew, which it's eerie. It really is, and it doesn't mean in the grand scheme of things that he wasn't right. Maybe we're all wrong. Maybe God is just us in the future, which is obviously we don't believe that, but that was so unscientific. And I love that part of the movie because they're showing us either it was just a thinly veiled thing that the director is atheist, or it's showing us that we do have doubt deeply ingrained in us, and this nobody's perfect. And so I thought it was a very humanizing moment in the movie. So thank you for letting me go on a tangent.
No, that's what this is all about. We let the ADHD rule supreme here.
Yes.
I want to go back because to that conversation, again, John Lithgow, Matthew McConaughey sitting on a porch.
Yes.
He's now met Professor Brand. He said, "You're the only pilot left alive. I don't know how you got here." But it's, again, they brought me in our language, God showed me, God put me in the place where I'm most needed at this moment.
Yep.
And basically he's like, "Well, we need you to go on this mission, save the world." And he's wrestling with it. Mm-hmm. And I think it's interesting, the questions that he asks himself, but also the response that his father-in-law says to him at this moment is actually something that will come up again later, but sort of reversed from this scientific and tangible sense of things.
This world was never enough for you, was it, Coop?
What, 'cause heading out there is what I feel like I was born to do? And it excites me? No, that does not make it wrong.
It might. Don't trust the right thing done for the wrong reason. The why of the thing, that's the foundation.
And the foundation's solid.
But that idea, like, I feel like I was born there. I've got a mission. Everything's aligning. And the father-in-law is giving him a word of caution just because, the stars align, just because this happened. I love that. The right thing for the wrong reason is still wrong.
Right. Yeah. Not to wax nihilistic, but we're just souls that were created to worship God. Like that is our purpose, is to create, we were created to interact and to love others and to love God and to be loved by God. So going to space, ultimately, it doesn't matter. God could,
Right.
snap his fingers and we could be in space. You can do literally anything. So like saying that the why of the thing is the purpose is so strong, because we do all these things. We endeavor. I work 60 hours a week right now, going to sports, going, physical therapy, the magazine, doing good stuff, helping people out. But why?
Right.
And if you don't step back and ask yourself that question, you will never make it.
Yeah, because it could feel great. It could feel aligned. And I've shared the story before. When I was volunteering in the church, and I was leading a volunteer team. I'd started in the parking group, and then I became an usher, and then an usher leader, and then an usher coordinator. And I went from going to a small group to leading small groups to leading leaders of small groups. All good stuff, all invited, all godly stuff.
Yeah.
But what happened was my family felt second. They're like, there's a chasm between us with the church that's splitting us apart as a family. And the why does matter. Why was I doing that? Was I doing it a little bit because it's like, oh, that's where I get my sense of belonging. That's where I get my sense of purpose, my sense of validation. I'm actually, I look like I'm doing good, but the why is you're feeding my ego. Right?
Yep, absolutely.
And so throughout, Jesus says we've got to basically sacrifice that ego. We've got to kill it in order to find life. We've got to do, that Proverbs that says there's a way that seems right to a man, but it's a path that leads to death. Yep. But Jesus basically said the reverse. There's a way that looks like death, but in it you'll find life. What you see them is they're wrestling. And he says the foundation is strong because why is Cooper going to space? It's to provide a life for his children.
Right.
That's his core motivation. Or at least it was until he lost 23 years on Miller's planet. And then I'm not sure what his motivation became.
Get home.
Right.
I mean, he went through a black hole to try to get home. It was just a happy accident that they figured out how black holes worked in the process,
Right. Yeah. And that's I think a really interesting point is because he did become broken. And I think I'm going to talk about that scene, the gap of 23 years. I'm going to talk about that on the YouTube channel.
Cool.
Because it is a very visual scene, but it's so powerful. It's probably the first, no, the second. The first one is when Murphy's trying to get Coop to stay. That's an emotionally wrecking one. Then seeing a father watching 23 years of his son's life flash before his eyes, it'll tear you up.
And there's something different about losing time from a child because you made a decision, as opposed to if you were torn apart by outside sources. The fact that it was your choice, Cooper's choice to do this, and it was their choice. That's a lot of those interplanetary movies really, really revolve around a small, a specific choice that has huge, outcomes. And because everything in space, we're not supposed to be there. Everything and every little thing could be a catastrophe. So they did a really good job in this movie about that. But that fact that their choices led them to that mistake it's something that you have to live with.
Right,
so, a strong thing.
Which is a beautiful transition and segue to this next scene, where they made choices, and the result of that choices was a loss of 23 years. The use of the fuel, so they can't go back. They now can't visit the other two planets. They only have enough fuel, and also return home. They can only visit one.
Right.
And remember, the why matters. The why is foundational.
Right.
So they're debating which one of these two planets will they visit. Will they visit Dr. Mann's planet, played by Matt Damon, which I think was Prep for the Martian, or maybe the sequel to the Martian.
Right. There's got to be some,
there's a lot of parallels.
Story world overlap.
But
yeah, I feel like The Martian was the prequel to Interstellar for sure.
Yeah. Or do they go to, I think, the other planet, Wolf's planet?
Yes, Wolf. Yes.
There's conflicting information, but what Dr. Brand, Amelia, Anne Hathaway's character is saying is she wants to go to this other planet, even though it's farther away, even though they haven't heard from him in 3 years. And it's not really based on science.
Right.
She's in love with Wolf Edmonds. Is that true?
Yes. And that makes me want to follow my heart. But maybe we've spent too long trying to figure all this out with theory.
You're a scientist, Bran.
So listen to me. When I say that love isn't something we invented, it's observable, powerful. It has to mean something.
Love has meaning, yes. Social utility, social bonding, child rearing.
We love people who have died. Where's the social utility in that?
None.
Maybe it means something more, something we can't yet understand. Maybe it's some evidence, some artifact of a higher dimension that we can't consciously perceive. I'm drawn across the universe to someone I haven't seen in a decade, who I know is probably dead. Love is the one thing we're capable of perceiving that transcends dimensions of time and space. Maybe we should trust that, even if we can't understand it yet. All right, Cooper. Yes. The tiniest possibility of seeing Wolf again excites me. That doesn't mean I'm wrong.
Honestly, Amelia, it might.
And that's the echo. I mean, almost word for word. It's like, it doesn't mean it's wrong. It might.
It might.
Like, the motivation,
Have
because
you considered that possibility?
Because his motivation had changed from saving his kids to seeing his kids. Like, I've lost 23 years. And I think many of us experience the same thing of, I made a choice. You know, there's a line that the Professor Brand said earlier is, you know, when he's like, I'm working on the equation. I haven't figured out how to lift the space station up. We're almost there. And Coop said, you're asking me to hang everything on an almost. And Brand says, I'm asking you to trust me. Mm-hmm. And as you mentioned, that trust was trust was not a thing that he really deserved.
Right.
But I think that God asks us that same question. We approach him and say, you're asking me to hang everything on an almost. And he says, I'm asking you to trust me. But then we get to a point where we've trusted him, where we feel like the cost is too great. And that's why I see it. And it's like, he's become this cold, scientific, data-driven person. He's no longer looking,
which is his fallback,
right?
Like that's what his defensive response is.
Because everything she says is correct. Everything she says is, they should have gone to Edmund's planet. That's his name. They should have, and we see at the end of the movie that planet is sustainable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They should have, and I love that idea that love is transcendent. Love is beyond us. Love crosses dimensions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just the full story world here. You know, I mean, if it is God, if it is us who have transcended eventually, like regardless, it's like you said, it's something. Or that she said, it's something that's not quantifiable right now. If we could quantify it, then all this other stuff wouldn't matter. Like, we would be to that point. The second you can prove it, it's not that it's not necessary anymore, but it completely changes the motivation of why we're here.
Right. And as they said earlier, the why is foundational. The why matters.
And I like that they leave it open ended, by saying, it's not wrong. It might be. He's not saying it is. He's challenging her, and his father-in-law is challenging him to ask the why. He's not saying it's wrong. He's saying, take a second and evaluate why you're doing it. That's all.
Which again it's not bad, but she brings up something that I didn't pull in the clip that I do want. We kind of had teed it up before. We want to talk about this idea of one, Murphy, her name, but Murphy's Law, which comes up a couple times in the movie. And which is Murphy's Law is what basically, if anything can happen, it will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Anything that can happen will happen eventually.
Right.
And then, recently, now that thanks to the MCU, we have our multiverses, that becomes even more plausible.
Here's where everything possible has happened. The infinity of
Right.
every minute decision is existing in some alternate dimension.
Right. Yeah. But it was cool because at the beginning of it, Murphy's upset. Like, why did you name me after something? Because, I think by now that's been clarified what Murphy's Law is, where, I remember back in the day, it's like, oh, Murphy's Law. Everybody would say it because when it was misconstrued as everything bad that can happen will happen.
Yeah, if something
Whenever
can
somebody's
go
having
wrong,
a bad
it
day
will.
and they stub their toe, stub your toe, spill your coffee. Oh, Murphy's Law. I'm having one of those days. Everything bad is going to happen. But and then Cooper, clarifies to her, no, everything that can happen will happen, and that sounds good to us. But what he's alluding to is almost fate, or destiny, I should say, more than fate, because in this specific situation, it's he doesn't think it's a spiritual thing. Not trying to avoid what you feel you should do, not trying to avoid who you feel you are. Those motivations, like, you were going to be born, so you were born, and that sounded just fine to us, and then we're going to raise you, and so they get to be able to have this experience without the guilt of it, because this is what's supposed to happen. I don't know.
Well, and her argument against going to man's planet is it's too close to the black hole. Because the black hole sucks in all the accidents. No meteors are going to hit it. And she says evolution happens through accidents.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And she actually, that's where she talks about Murphy's Law, because things need to happen. But you're like, okay, that's weird, whatever. But if you look at the way that we treat our lives, we want our lives to be as accident-free, as unplanned eventuality,
Right.
a little mystery, because if we decrease the mystery, we decrease the risk in our minds. But if anything can happen, it probably will. And like you said, we always associate if something happens to be bad.
Right.
And what she says about those planets is not enough happens. Not enough happens to sustain life. On one planet, we see this big water world, unsustainable for life. On the other one, it's a frozen, nothing happens, unsustainable for life. You've got to, and we have to enter into a phase where more things can happen, where we can put ourselves in position to experience more ups and downs. Remember, we're explorers. We've got to look to the stars, not lose ourselves in the dirt.
Just to distinguish, the last time we talked about the fifth element, and Zorg pushes the glass off the table and it shatters, and he says, look at all these things that have a purpose now. Yeah. So there's a difference between saying, in order for there to be light, there has to be darkness. That's it's essentially a lie. And then what we're talking about, which is, in order to have progression, you have to have freedom and you have to have variability. Not that those variables have to be destructive; they have to be stimulating. Going on the theme of this movie, it's to talk about entropy. It's like everything has an end. Everything is slowly dissolving. And as humans, we're just trying to fight it back against that. We're trying to live as long as we can. We're trying to keep, our things without dust on them and stuff like that. So that's one way of trying to hold on to control. But instead, you can use those things to see the beauty of what you have and the beauty of what God has created and things like that. So I think being able to embrace that change, as opposed to using it as a stimulus to control it, is a big kind of mind shift.
Yeah, I love how you brought up the term variability, because we don't like our lives to be variable.
No.
But even as we're talking right now, I have 4 pots of chili cooking upstairs because my wife made chili a couple weeks ago, and it's good. I'm like, I want to make my own, like, I want to have my recipe. I want to I have this idea, like robust. I'm going to put some corn in it, some different beans, and make it seasoned. To me, it's a darker chili, but I've never really made chili before.
So you're experimenting.
So I'm experimenting. So I've got yes, it's very, I even did sort of scientific. It's like, okay, these all have, some certain base ingredients. They all have black beans, they all have corn, they all have, tomatoes and all this stuff. But like in this one, I put red kidney beans. In this one, I put pinto beans. In this one, I put ghost pepper salt. In this one, I put Scotch bonnet peppers. So I changed it, adjusted it. And because my wife's vegetarian, I have 2 that are meat. One that's a Beyond Burger and one that's like a crumble of plant-based protein. So it's like I have, 2 veggie options, 2 meat options. I actually wrote down the differences, what I put different in each one.
Nice. Yeah.
Because it's like, okay, let's try these 4. There's an orange bell pepper and a yellow bell pepper. But I can't tell you how hard it is to pull the trigger and actually make the chili, because it's like, what if this sucks? What if I screw it up? What if I mess it up? What if there's a better option I didn't know about, so I didn't do it? I wanted to try poblano peppers in one of them, but I couldn't find them around here. So that's in the next iteration, the next experiment group, right?
Yes.
And I know it's silly. We're talking about chili, right?
Nothing silly about chili.
Yeah, that's right. But I think for our lives, we have to approach it that way. One is the vast majority of stuff we do is never forever.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's very few decisions we can't come back from.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I thought I wanted to go to college. I didn't. Oh, I didn't want to go to college, but I did. Oh, I asked that girl out. You don't have to ask her out again. Like if it goes poorly, you just don't do it. But we seem to think that
we learn.
If we do this, then there's 20 steps down the road that we have to do. Instead of just embracing that step that's in front of us is let's try this. Let's introduce variability into our lives and see what happens. See what God does in it.
Exactly. Yeah. I think it's easy to kind of see that scenario. It's a dumbed down thought, but you go through life either pragmatic or intuitive.
Right.
Either you're going to break down every single thought and step, or you're going to follow love, follow your heart, follow what you feel like you should, those artifacts of something higher, that type of thing. We had mentioned Timothy Chalamet earlier, and that reminded me of Dune. They don't go into it as much in the movie, but in the book, the whole power of Paul is the fact that the spice awakened something in him to where he could see almost infinite possibilities. The only reason we as humans have the scientific method is because of our finite, processing power. If we could see every, projection of every ripple of everything we do, we would essentially see the future, do anything. And so the scientific theory is just trying to harness a little bit of control and trying to figure that out. Like you said, it's impossible. You'll drive yourself crazy trying to figure out every variability. But every now and then, if a situation warrants itself, like you said with the chili, why have the same chili for the rest of your life whenever you can spend one day figuring out what kind of chili you like, and then you've improved your quality of life for the rest forever. So why not take that step? Don't drive yourself crazy trying to make this your life's work, but appreciate the process for what it is.
That's why I'm no good at chess. They say say that chess players can see what is it? The grandmasters see 7 or 8 moves ahead. I'm like, I don't even know that I want to.
Exactly. It's a personality thing. It's how you see the world. Yeah, exactly. And that's what's beautiful about the way that God created us. Yeah. Everybody sees reality a little bit differently. And those people that do that, that's how their mind works and that's how they've harnessed it. But just because we don't understand that doesn't mean they're wrong. And I love that. I love the fact that they can see reality slightly different, but it doesn't change that we are all a part of the human race designed for one purpose.
And what we see in Coop is just about every decision he makes is the wrong one.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they go to visit Dr. Mann, who's been lying to them all along. Oh, by the way, so was Professor Brand back home. There was no plan A.
Mm-hmm.
It was always about sending them off to colonize. So they get back. Mann has wrecked their ship. They only have enough they don't have enough fuel really to get home. They can't go through the wormhole with a busted ship. So the plan is, Amelia is going to go to follow her heart to see if Edmonds is alive. And Cooper is going to try to get home to his kids. Again, every decision that he's made has been wrong by tangible, measurable results.
And it's important to note a lot of it's because he never had all the information.
Yeah, and we never do. We never do.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Yep. Yeah.
This movie is super complex. One of the reasons that it's so good is because we get to this moment where he enters the black hole. He's in this, as Tar says, they took these supernatural beings, or they took time and made it 3-dimensional so that you could manipulate it. So he's starting to figure things out. And what he realizes that it wasn't them that sent him. It was him and this thing that manipulated. He was the ghost that was moving books in Murphy's room, that was doing the stuff with the dust. He says, we're the bridge, which I actually love that idea. Like we, as Christians, are the bridge between the supernatural and the world around us.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, God could manipulate the world around us, right? Jesus said he could make, bread, stones turn into bread, all the stuff, but he chooses to use us. He chooses to use the 12 disciples to spread the gospel around the world.
It's that whole idea that we're the conduit, like we're the radio, like there's radio waves everywhere and we're the ones who broadcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so Cooper realizes that Brand was onto something while he's floating there. He's trying to communicate with his daughter. The super powerful scene where he's begging his past self to stay. Where it's like, no, you need to stay. You need to stay. Knowing that he leaves because he's lived that already. Like to an extent, he's just watching the past. And that idea that they didn't bring us here to change the past is also true, because where I'm going is this idea of shame that we carry and how God can redeem even our mistakes, even the choices we wish we had back. And that's why I got to be such a wreck, because like I saw the pain my daughter especially had as a result of the divorce, of her feeling like I left.
Right.
And that idea that love can transcend time. That's the thing. We have to give it time, right?
Yeah.
And it ends up in this scene as he's floating around. He has a realization as the daughter's realizing her father's still there and has been there all along. As he's talking to Tars, narrating what he's about to do, he comes to the same realization that Amelia had when she wanted to go to Edmund's planet.
All of this is one little girl's bedroom, every moment. It's infinitely complex. They have access to infinite time and space, but they're not bound by anything. They can't find a specific place in time. They can't communicate. That's why I'm here. I'm gonna find a way to tell Murph, just like I found this moment.
How, Cooper?
Love, Tars, love. It's just like Brand said. My connection with Murph, it is quantifiable. It's the key.
What are we here to do?
Find out, I tell her. The watch. The watch. That's it. We code the data into the movement of the second hand. Tars, Translate the data into Morse and feed it to me.
Translating data to Morse. Cooper, what if she never came back for it?
She will. She will.
Murph, I can see his car! He's coming, Murph!
Okay, I'm coming down.
How do you know?
Because I gave it to her.
All right, you react.
I'm trying, but I'm trying to also force down my emotions, Paul.
I'm like, oh no, you do it because I gotta wipe the tears out of my eyes.
Okay. So yeah, I'll give it my best go here. Like you said, as far as the fact that love transcends time, he saw it in his daughter from the moment his daughter was born. He saw the connection that they had. He stared his daughter in her face essentially when she recorded that message. We talked about that earlier. The one message that she recorded specifically to him. She recorded another one, but this one was to him, saying, you were the same age now. You told me that when I came back, we might be the same age. Well, that's today. And then she signed off, and that was the last time that she talked to him. That would have been easy for him to think, she's given up on me. This, she hates me now. She's never gonna send me another video. She's written me off, but he didn't. And in that moment, he explains why. We have emotional outbursts. We have moments where we think we hate a person, but when it comes down to it, their connection was, essentially transcended time, and his ability or her ability to hold on to that trust, even in the face of, seemingly being lied to, being left, all those things. She held on to it just as tight then as she always had, and he knew that was a tether that they had.
Yeah, that variability shapes us. The variability, the stuff that we don't want. Right? Murph didn't want her dad to leave, but her dad had to leave. Her dad had to make those mistakes to get him in that position. Yeah. To be there to share the information. There was no one else that could have done it. And what I saw in that scene before where he's begging his prior self to stay was, the burden's too much. The pain is too much. I don't want to go through this again. Let me just go back and die with my kids because I never left. Right. And but when she realizes it was you all along, she understands the Father's love, and she receives it, and she opens herself up, and she has a life after that, right? And that leads us to our last scene.
Yeah, so basically he wakes up on the space station, and on a space station that he thinks is named after him, but is actually named after her, right? Cooper Space Station. So then he finds out that his daughter has become, basically the savior of the human race by translating the data that he gave to her. And then so they say she's still alive. And then if it's the first time you're watching this movie, you start doing the math and think, she can't still be alive. She'd be like 140 or something like that. But then she actually put herself to sleep, because they've at some point in, this reality, they've perfected cryo sleep. She wakes up and they wake her up, presumably by express, instructions. When my dad comes back, you will wake me up. Because otherwise she put herself to sleep to be dead. The last thing she did was put herself to sleep, and he's never going to come back. And then that's the end of her life. But she knew so deeply that he was going to come back that she was like, okay, now I'm close to the end of my life. I can't wait any longer. Naturally, put me to sleep, wake me up when he comes back. So she makes the trip to the space station. When he gets there, all of her kids and grandkids are there with her, surrounding her. Again, I'm going to try not to tear up, but just such a powerful thing to see that generational thing. And so he walks into the room, and, their meeting is just so powerful. And everybody says, how did you know he's going to come back? Because he's my dad. He said he would. Yeah. And it's just so matter of fact. And then after that, he says, I'm never leaving again. I'm here for you, and she says, no parent should have to watch their child die, which is special for me in some other ways. But she says, I have my family here with me now. I can let you go. I've seen you. I knew you would come back. You did. And then she is able to not close that loop, but embrace it for the most part. So, yeah. And also I think a secondary part of that is she knew that his story wasn't done. Right. his job is up there. He still has other stuff to do. Go find Brand, because she's out there trying to colonize a world and she needs you. So go. But yeah, no, super powerful.
Yeah, because she had been set free earlier, back in her 30s,
right,
when she realized that the ghost was her dad. She's like, oh,
yeah,
it's been you all along. However, he was only set free when she set him free, because the whole movie is you got to make things right with Murph. And that even that painful scene where he's like, I got to go. He drives off as she runs out the door. And you're like, oh, that moment of healing and connection that he was so craving was lost.
Yeah.
And it was until the end that really now he can live life for himself, because he had been living it. His focus was on them, either saving the world for them or, getting back to them. And now that he had done both, now he could live a life in the stars, which is where he belonged.
And the why, right? The motivation of the why, like at this point, he was free to go on to this next step because of the why.
So our big question, our takeaways is, one is, how can you introduce variability into your life? You don't have to make 4 different kinds of chili. You can try different things, but I would say start small.
Yeah.
And then
love transcends dimensions.
Yeah, love transcends. Yeah, because again, God is love, and it talks about that. Like, love, and God being love is also sort of a tangible being. And I don't know. I'm rambling a little bit. You got any closing thought, Andrew?
Yeah. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head with a couple of those things. Don't be afraid, because in essence, this is an exploration movie. It's a masterpiece in many other levels, but it is an exploration movie. We're driven to the excitement of new things from the comfort of our couch, right? So, but yeah, so get excited about stuff. Don't fear the future. Be excited about it, because God is in control. Nothing is meant to last forever. Enjoy what he has given you. Enjoy the truth that he has our best interests at heart. Yes, there's tragedies that happens, and there's cliches that make it sound that give us false hope. But the fact that we do have the ability to go out and be excited about the world that he created, because he loves us and loved us enough to create a world for us, is pretty awesome.
Yeah. Well, thank you for carving out a little bit of time here on your Saturday. Go check out the anthology. What was the name of it? Animal Kingdom on gohavoc.com. It'll be available by the time this podcast comes out. And so thank you again, Andrew, for joining me.
Absolutely.
This has been Paul McDonald and Andrew Winch talking about Interstellar. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you join us next time here on the Men at the Movies podcast.
Something inside has been awakened. I can no longer be who I was before. But if I am no longer who I was, who am I to be?